3,500 years ago, under the scorching desert sun of what is now the northern Sinai, a massive military fortress spanning 2 whole acres stood guard. And guess what? Archaeologists just found it.
Beneath the flawless facade of a war machine, history often conceals far harsher truths. For more than 3,000 years, the sands of the Sinai Peninsula buried Tel Karuba, a massive fortress of ancient Egypt. Above ground, its fortified watchtowers and zigzag defensive walls suggested absolute military strength. Yet recent excavations have overturned that impression entirely. Beneath the central courtyard, a network of narrow tunnels has emerged, leading to sealed chambers hidden from view. This subterranean space contained neither provisions nor weapons, but instead preserved records of foreign trade alongside skeletal remains bearing clear signs of execution. What circumstance demanded the construction of a covert operational complex beneath an official fortress? Or was the entire structure itself nothing more than a grand facade built to conceal secrets that could never be spoken? The symbol of order! The North Sinai Desert is no meaningless wasteland. It stands instead as a vital geographic corridor for ancient Egyptian civilization. Across this barren ribbon of sand runs the legendary Horus Road, the single lifeblood artery linking the fertile Nile Delta plains to the coastal lands along the eastern Mediterranean. Any power that seized control of the Horus Road held the economic and security throat of the entire region. It was precisely at one of the most critical strategic choke points along this route that the Tel Karuba fortress rose. The surface of the site covers an area reaching 2 acres, its outer perimeter forming an almost perfect rectangle. Every visible architectural detail on the ground served one single purpose: to establish an impenetrable military line of defense. The strongest impression arises from the internal enclosure wall system and its distinctive zigzag design. Constructed from sun-dried mud bricks, reinforced with stone and finished in smooth plaster, the continuous folds and curves of this wall form a masterpiece of passive defensive engineering. The placement of these angled bends allows the structure to scatter the force of high-speed sand-laden winds while preventing the accumulation of shifting dunes. Features invaders might otherwise exploit as natural ramps to overwhelm the ramparts. Guarding the entire perimeter stand 11 colossal watchtowers spaced at even intervals, forming a web of overlapping observation and firepower without a single blind spot. Foundation artifacts further confirm the military legitimacy of the complex. Buried deep beneath the bases of the watchtowers, archaeologists uncovered clay jars holding offerings stamped with the official seal of Pharaoh Thutmose I, verifying direct oversight and patronage from the empire's highest authority. Viewed from the surface, the Tel Karuba site matches perfectly the classic image of a war machine honed to absolute precision. Yet, when the surrounding sediment layers receive close examination, a strange gap in the record begins to appear. For a fortress engineered specifically to resist sieges, the perimeter zone ought to overflow with evidence of violence. Layers of ash from fire assaults, foreign arrowheads lodged in mud bricks, or erosion marks left by siege engines. Instead, the enclosure walls of Tel Karuba display an integrity and quietude that feels profoundly unnatural. The southern wall, stretching nearly 340 feet, still preserves almost its entire original fabric. This massive architectural block appears never to have endured any attempt at destruction or any high-intensity frontal attack. Why would such a grand war machine, stationed at the busiest transportation choke point of the ancient world, carry no scars of actual combat? The rhythm of the void. The unusual stillness outside the walls compels analysis to shift inward, toward the central courtyard and the living quarters where traces of human activity still linger. Based on the scale of the spaces and the carefully divided residential structures, experts estimate that Tel Karuba could sustain up to 700 soldiers operating simultaneously. For a desert outpost, this represents an enormous garrison density, demanding an extraordinarily complex logistical and organizational system. Discoveries in the living areas confirm that this was no temporary guard post, but a fully functioning military settlement operating at high tempo without interruption. Fastened to the inner walls are clusters of clay ovens whose mouths remain intact after more than 3,000 years. Around this dining zone, countless fragments of broken pottery and stone grinders lie scattered, painting a vivid scene of hundreds of soldiers preparing daily rations beneath the desert sun. The logistical reach of the fortress proves so robust that dark volcanic stone fragments imported directly from the distant Aegean islands appear among the ruins, evidence that its supply lines stretched all the way across the Mediterranean. Yet right in the midst of this facility, running at peak capacity, one tiny artifact upended every assumption about how the fortress ended. Resting on the ground beside one of the ovens lay a lump of fossilized dough. The presence of this unfinished dough freezes a moment of total interruption. It reveals that the abandonment of Tel Karuba did not follow any orderly withdrawal plan, but occurred as a sudden, lightning event that forced those inside to abandon food still being prepared. The absurdity lies here. This panicked departure left behind no trace of any destructive assault from outside, just as the enclosure walls had already shown. Hundreds of elite soldiers, fully equipped and shielded by an impregnable defensive structure, vanished together without leaving a single fallen warrior's body on the watchtowers or training grounds. If the fortress maintained so large and vital a standing garrison, what true purpose did those 700 troops serve, if not to fight an enemy? And what invisible force compelled them to desert this lifeblood outpost in the middle of an ordinary working day?
The Wall of Faith!
The traceless disappearance of the garrison leaves a void difficult to fill. Yet the physical structure of Tel Karuba itself tells an entirely contrary story of eternal presence. To grasp the coming paradox, one must first view this architecture through the eyes of an ancient Egyptian military engineer, a man who never wasted a single brick on any uncalculated goal. The layout of the fortress was never a mere sketch drawn in sand. It formed a declaration of absolute spatial domination. Covering 2 full acres, the rectangular perimeter created a harsh boundary that sharply divided ordered civilization from chaotic wilderness. In the mindset of the New Kingdom era, a project of this scale served not merely as shelter, but as the physical extension of the pharaoh's own power. The pinnacle of this military thinking resides in the internal enclosure wall with its signature zigzag pattern. Seen from above, the structure resembles colossal saw teeth driven deep into the desert floor. Modern aerodynamic analysis applied to the ruins shows it functioned as an exquisitely refined microclimate machine. On the Sinai Peninsula, sandstorms carrying razor-sharp quartz grains race at tremendous speeds and act as a natural grinding engine capable of leveling flat walls within mere decades. By folding the wall into successive zigzag angles, the architects deliberately shattered the wind's kinetic flow, forcing it to change direction and cancel its own force at every intersection. Tactically, these folds created perfect hidden pockets. An archer positioned on the zigzag rampart stayed safely shielded from direct fire from below while gaining deadly crossfire angles against any squad attempting to scale the face. The design turned every square yard of the perimeter into a high lethality trap, confirming its ultimate goal of crushing every attempt at forced entry. The investment in defensive capacity extended far beyond local materials. The discovery of dark volcanic stone blocks, integrated into the foundations and critical zones, startled many archaeological geologists. The origin of this stone traces definitively to the Aegean Islands, hundreds of miles away across the Mediterranean Sea. In the context of ancient transport technology, Moving such enormous raw stone masses over that harsh maritime and overland distance required colossal logistical expense, an effort only a national treasury could sustain. Volcanic stone offered superior hardness and crack resistance compared with local limestone or sandstone, ideal for reinforcing the load-bearing points of the watchtowers. The decision to trade vast economic resources for structural integrity demonstrates that Egyptian rulers judged the threat at Tel Karuba extremely grave, demanding a physical shell that could never be destroyed at any cost. Beyond physical strength, the fortress received reinforcement through an invisible ideological shield of state doctrine. When the deepest foundation layers beneath the 11 watchtowers were carefully peeled away, precisely carved cavities emerged. Inside them, clay jars containing ritual offerings lay buried in strict geometric order. What gave these artifacts their true weight was not material value, but the characters carved upon their surfaces. The official seal of Pharaoh Thutmose I. Within Egypt's intricate administrative and religious system, the royal seal was never applied casually. Its burial beneath the foundations of a military work established supreme ownership, a form of signature that placed the entire structure under the protection of the gods and the ruler's absolute authority. It transformed the fortress from a simple assembly of bricks and stones into a sacred stronghold where any violation counted as both treason and blasphemy. Taken together, from the aerodynamics of the zigzag wall to the transcontinental supply chain of imported volcanic stone, and finally the pharaoh's personal copyright seal, the portrait of Tel Karuba emerges as the most perfect defensive fortress ever created in the ancient world. Every element points outward, ready to meet and shatter the fiercest assaults. The extreme perfection of this defensive system forged an exceptionally solid filter of perception. It compelled anyone studying the site to believe that a complex engineered with such secrecy and strength could serve only one purpose: strategic military defense. With a ground-level design containing no weakness whatsoever, it seemed there remained no room for any other interpretation of its true nature. The violation beneath the surface, just at the moment when confidence in the military fortress model had reached absolute certainty, that entire logical foundation collapsed from within. It was not destroyed by any foreign assault, but by a truth long buried under the footsteps of patrolling soldiers. When the cleaning of the central courtyard began, the vast flat area believed to be the assembly and training ground for 700 soldiers, the devices for scanning underground layers detected a structural anomaly lying deep beneath the foundation stones. Careful excavation revealed a narrow fissure leading down into a tunnel system that had no place in any standard military design of the New Kingdom period. These tunnels had been carved directly into the bedrock and were extremely cramped, forcing any adult to bend almost double merely to move through them. This represented a serious violation of fortress architectural principles. An underground passage intended for surprise sorties or emergency escape should have been wide enough for soldiers to carry weapons and move swiftly. The constricted dimensions showed clearly that the structure had not been built for troop movement. It was designed instead to restrict access to the greatest possible degree in order to conceal something at its farthest end. This oppressive network of tunnels led to a sequence of 3 isolated chambers, each one deliberately sealed with massive stone blocks before the fortress was abandoned. When the seal of the first chamber was broken, the interior held no stockpiled weapons or underground food stores as one might expect. Instead, neatly arranged rows of clay tablets came into view. As ancient language experts began deciphering them, a grave inconsistency emerged. The characters on these clay surfaces were not standard Egyptian hieroglyphs alone. They formed a hybrid writing system that combined Egyptian symbols with the languages of the Canaanites and Hittites, foreign powers that frequently clashed with the empire. The content recorded detailed accounts of large-scale commercial transactions and inventories of special goods, such as copper, grain, livestock, and rare materials. The storage of international trade records deep underground inside a military fortress using foreign languages pointed to the presence of economic spies, black market merchants, or an illicit trading network that had no place in the public administrative reports of the state. The strangeness intensified in the second chamber. At the center of this space stood a series of sealed ceramic jars filled with residues of bitumen mixed with minerals, a rare material typically used for special preservation purposes. They had been arranged in a semicircle around a large stone slab carved with extraordinary precision. The lines on this slab accurately reproduce the zigzag structure and the ground plan of Tel Karuba, including all measurements and orientation data. A technical drawing of this level of detail normally held value only during the construction phase. The fact that it had been carefully preserved and sealed inside a secret space long after the fortress became operational was highly illogical. Even more telling, resting right at the edge of the stone slab lay a solid gold amulet bearing the personal seal of Pharaoh Thutmose I. Unlike the ritual jars placed symbolically beneath the watchtower foundations in public view, this golden amulet in the underground space represented a deeply personal and secret assertion of power. It provided physical proof that the covert activities here were not rogue actions by garrison officers, but were being directed from the throne itself with absolute secrecy. The third chamber, situated at the deepest and darkest point of the tunnel system, delivered a fatal blow to every assumption of a conventional military fortress. Scattered across the cold earthen floor lay the skeletal remains of at least 3 individuals. There were no signs of traditional Egyptian burial rites, no linen wrappings, no grave goods to accompany them into the afterlife. Forensic analysis of these bones reconstructed a scene of savage violence. One individual had been pierced through the chest from behind by a bronze arrow that remained lodged in the spine. Another skull had been shattered by an extremely powerful blunt force impact. The nature of the wounds and the hasty method of concealment left no room for doubt. These were victims of secret executions. Taking lives inside a military installation without public trial and then hiding the bodies directly beneath the ground stood in complete contradiction to army discipline. A defensive fortress created to protect the border from external enemies was never meant to function as an underground slaughterhouse for unrecorded deaths. The body of evidence beneath the surface completely demolished the surface-level interpretation. If the true purpose was not military defense, then what dark machinery was this grandiose structure rising from the desert actually concealing? The two worlds of Tel Karuba. The underground discoveries did not erase the existence of the fortress above ground, yet they created a profoundly disturbing parallel reality, forcing analytical thinking to confront a far more complex truth. The Tel Karuba fortress now stood divided into 2 entirely opposing entities, operating simultaneously at the very same geographic location. Above, beneath the scorching Sinai sun, existed a colossal military machine. 700 soldiers bearing Egyptian insignia performed daily parade drills in the central courtyard, sharpened their weapons, patrolled along the impregnable zigzag walls, and offered incense at the compact shrine of god Horus near the enclosure. They operated under iron discipline, utterly convinced that their noble mission was to serve as the steel shield protecting the empire from eastern threats. The bustle of activity, the clash of weapons, the aroma of baking bread from the clay ovens created a flawless auditory and visual screen of a desert outpost functioning at full capacity. Yet only a few meters of bedrock beneath the heavy marching footsteps on the surface, a second world, dark and silent, quietly manipulated everything. Inside the suffocating tunnels that never saw sunlight, teams of special agents, Royal scribes or even foreign spies worked tirelessly recording strategic transactions in their hybrid script. Sensitive cargo and unrecorded financial flows moved through a hidden economic network. And in the most shadowed corner of that space, individuals who threatened the safety of these secret operations, perhaps agents serving both sides who had been exposed, treacherous merchants, or people who knew too much, were eliminated with cold efficiency. Their bodies were cast into eternal darkness without any soldier above ever knowing. These two worlds existed together, yet remained completely different in nature, impossible to reconcile under the single label of a mere military fortress. This stark contrast gave birth to a new perspective that completely redefined the true purpose of the construction. The enormous scale, the luxurious investment in Aegean stone, and the extremely sophisticated defensive system of Tel Karuba may not have been designed to protect the external trade route at all. They were possibly built instead to protect the very secrets lying below. The garrison of 700 soldiers with all their noisy activities may not have been the core fighting force. They likely served instead as the perfect outer shell, a grand-scale theatrical performance intended to divert the attention of any spy network or outside scrutiny. What safer place could exist to locate a strategic intelligence center, a station for trading state-prohibited goods, or a black prison than directly beneath the most heavily fortified and crowded military base in the region? The clamor of military operations provided the most perfect insulation against sound for the screams rising from the chambers below. This division into two worlds also offered a fresh lens through which to explain the mysterious abandonment of the site. The lump of fossilized dough left beside the oven on the surface indicated panic and the instantaneous nature of an evacuation. The soldiers may have received an urgent relocation order that forced them to drop everything in a single moment. However, the condition of the underground area told an entirely different story regarding timing. Sealing the chambers containing diplomatic documents, the stamped technical drawing and the human remains with large stone blocks required time, effort, and careful calculation. This suggests that while the surface military force withdrew in haste, another group, those who held the real secrets, remained long enough to carry out a thorough cleanup operation and seal the entire scene. They ensured that everything which had occurred at Tel Karuba would remain forever buried with the desert. The difference in speed and manner of handling between the two zones further reinforced the independence and hidden control exercised by the underground apparatus over its surface cover. The truth beneath Tel Karuba shattered the established boundaries of power in ancient Egypt. It proved that the great dynasties did not rule solely through overwhelming military strength or the divine radiance of the gods. They also governed through a complex web of deception, shadowy transactions, and invisible violence. A single architectural work could wear the appearance of a shield, yet function in reality as a machine for crushing truth. Standing before the sand-engulfed ruins of this fortress, confronted by the contradiction between a sacred architectural plan and the executed skeletons, a profound gap in perception opens wide. If the most impregnable defensive symbol of an empire was in fact only an elaborate disguise for ruthless covert operations, then among the thousands of monumental remains history has left upon the earth, how many other grand structures are quietly smiling while hiding their own dark truths that were never meant to be spoken?